And George, I'm going to read off an intro and a bio, and then we'll just jump into it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Make One Day Happen podcast, y'all. It's your girl, Sheena Jean. And when I tell you that I've got a special guest for us today, woo-wee, do I have a legendary guest. George Mumford is a globally recognized speaker, teacher, and coach. Since 1989, he's been honing his groundbreaking performance and mindfulness techniques with people from locker rooms to boardrooms, from Yale to jail. Michael Jordan, yes, the Michael Jordan, credits George with transforming his on-court leadership, while Mumford has also worked with Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, countless other NBA players, Olympians, executives, and artists. Mumford's first book, The Mindful Athlete, Secrets to Pure Performance, is a memoir and instruction guide to accessing your inner masterpiece. His new book, Unlocked, Embrace Your Greatness, Find the Flow, and Discover Success, was just released in May 2023. And I'll be honest, y'all, I didn't know how he was going to top his first book. However, he knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. While he was at the University of Massachusetts, he roomed with future Hall of Famer Dr. J. Julius Erving, and injuries forced Mumford out of basketball and into addiction to pain medication and drugs. With the help of meditation and mindfulness, he got clean and made it his mission to teach and work with others. So with just so much excitement, George, welcome to the show. I'm really, really, really excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here and excited to be visiting with you today.
Same. There
And your
is
audience as well. But yeah, it's good to see you. Yeah.
Likewise, sir. Likewise. I was telling you right before we started recording, I like over prepared to under prepare for this. And there are just so many things that I could go off on tangents on and want to talk about. And so I'm going to trust, like you mentioned in your book, that whatever we need to say is going to be useful and that whatever we need to say is going to be given to us. And I want to start with just an acknowledgement, because the way that you synthesize, simplify, and share complex, heady topics on consciousness of all things, I would say that that's the same way that Michael Jordan could float across a court and make it look effortless. As my nibblings would say, my little nieces and nephews, like, you're goated. You are literally the goat of teaching modern day mindfulness. And one of my favorite concepts that you speak to in both of your books is no struggle, no swag. And I'd love for us to really start there and have you give our listeners kind of that high level overview of who you be and how you got here and a little bit of that struggle to swag story of yours.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So I lived, let me see. So I just celebrated 39 years of sobriety in July. Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, like a lot of folks, I grew up a certain way. I had a certain way of being, and I encountered a lot of difficulty. People would say to me things like, "Well, why do you talk about your substance abuse and your chronic pain and your struggle, not knowing who you were when you got injured and stopped playing basketball in college?" And I say to them that no struggle, no swag means that or the baptism of the fire. What Joseph Campbell said in The Power of Myth is where your pain is where your life is.
Mm.
And it's another way of saying is you go into the pain. The only way out is always through. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but you go into it not identifying with it, but using it as a motivation and using it as a teacher and
Mm.
realizing the pain is telling you something's not right and you got to deal with it. And even if it is pain that you can't avoid, you don't have to create suffering out of it by
Mm.
acting like it shouldn't be there and pushing it away. Once again, it's always about just saying yes to it, and then what's the lesson, and then leveling up. So for me, so I went through all of that, even though a lot of my friends, several of my friends were playing in the NBA, and of course I didn't get to do that, but I struggled for years with substance abuse, being a I would say functional substance abuser, getting addicted to pain meds and then to alcohol and heroin. But at some point I was just taking everything. Didn't matter if it was crack, whatever could alter my consciousness. If I could watch the Three Stooges and it alter my consciousness, I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was really more. So I got to a place where I like to talk about it as what I call the AOF method of motivation. and that basically is ass on fire. So
Let's
there had
go.
to be a sense of urgency, and I came to the realization at some point on April Fool's Day, believe it or not, that when a friend of mine came by and he was clean and he took me to an AA meeting, and that's when I realized when I first saw him, I got inspired by, okay, what's dude doing? Because he looked different and he's like me and he's doing that. Then that's an opportunity. That's a possibility for me. And so, of course, it took me three more months before I finally went into detox and came out of the detox, and I was a different person. And then from there, it was just a matter of me just being able to behave my way into proper thinking, and just do the things that I needed to do instead of trying to think my way into them.
Hmm.
And I like to talk about it in some ways. I talk about you got to forget yourself to find yourself, and I found myself in service and um, yeah, in service, prayer and meditation, but really going inside, it's an inside job, and just really listening and stop drowning out that still small voice, but actually creating the space and the silence to actually hear it.
Hmm.
Because we have this ability, I call it the masterpiece within, or the place of rest Joseph Campbell talks about, but there's an ability when we come out of that place of rest, there's unlimited creativity and wisdom that expresses itself in that way. And so it's just really more about me just saying yes to life and then figuring out, generating hope and figuring out, okay, what's the lesson here? How can I be myself? How can I be of service? And that's how it came about. And of course, one of the things I recognized early on in recovery was that I had this need to be intellectually stimulated. So I've been averaging now, this is year 40 I'm in. I'm still averaging at least a book a week.
Let's go.
Yeah, and as well as just now that I have Audible and podcasts and WhisperSync and all of these other things, I can ingest books and teachings and just information in ways where I'm always learning. But a lot of it really is just like Yogi Berra, the Hall of Famer for the New York uh, Yankees. Of course, I'm in Boston, so people might get upset with me when I say this, but I love Yogi. He said you can see a lot just by observing, you know.
Mm.
So, and he
Mm.
also said something very profound. He said, when you get to the fork in the road, take it.
Yeah.
So it's the simplicity of what we talked about and how profound that is, even though it ain't over till it's over, or someone made a comment about his hitting, and he said, "Lady, I don't hit with my face." So, so it's really, or I ain't no slump, I just ain't hitting. All of these nuggets of wisdom that you can listen and you can learn from yourself. You can learn from anybody. So it's really more about being a learner, being excited about life, seeing life as an adventure, and the greatest adventure that I'm on, that I can be on, is getting to know myself better.
Mm. I love this. I really love, again, both of your books. I'm a avid reader as well. And what I love from the Mindful Athlete is, that's really that memoir style, yet also hybrid personal development
Hmm.
book. And uh, again, as someone who grew up in sports and huge basketball fan, that book is easy for me to get into. And what
Yes.
I really love that you did in your second book, um, Unlocked, is that you went deeper on different subjects and yet also broader at the same time to bring in a wider audience that might
Hmm.
not have the understanding and analogies or history with basketball, and to recognize that this greatness, well, yes, MJ and Kobe and some of the other incredible athletes that you've worked with come with a different type of skill set than a
Hmm.
lot of the rest of us. We all have that masterpiece within. We all have the greatness
Right.
that we can tap into if we choose, like you were saying, to get quiet, listen to those still voices within that are always whispering wisdom and instructions and guidance for us. We're just usually too busy piling on with the distractions. And not to mention, this world is designed, in my opinion, to keep us disconnected from ourselves, to
Yes.
keep us in the madness of what's going on the news, or instead of loving thy neighbor, let's find another way to pick on thy neighbor, and kind of all of the things. So I would love to start with the idea of growing my dad. One of the things that I can just still hear his voice in my head. Sheen, are you shooting to miss or are you shooting to make right now? And that has been such a translatable lesson in my life that was on the court that happened, but really comes off the court. And like, yeah, if I am coming at this with the mindset of like, I'm not going to make it or I'm going to fail at this, if I'm bringing fear, worry, and doubt into the equation, then I'm setting myself up for more likely than not failure versus success. And so that lesson has predisposed me to have a really positive mindset and confidence in life. However, when you started talking about at the beginning of Unlocked, the idea of the best way to make buckets is to not try and make buckets,
Yes, yes,
my head exploded. I was like, what? I'm not supposed to be focused on making buckets. Like, I'm still picking up the pieces, trying to integrate this one into my life, George.
yes,
And so,
yes,
can you speak a little bit more on
yes.
that
Thank you
idea?
for asking that. So this is something that took me decades to figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
is that you form the intention, then you relax, and then you allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
See, because in the action of I got to do this, there's this efforting. This is like Sisyphus pushing a rock up the hill. It goes up, comes back down. It's too much. You're exerting too much effort when slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just say, okay, do it. So you're not focused on how you're doing. You're focused on what you're doing. But the reality is, when we get focused on the outcome, we're not in the moment, and then we're getting anxious about it, and we're looking, and we get into the fear mode because we're afraid of failing. So we're looking for signposts to say we're going in the right direction, or it's gonna work. And so what this is really about is the best way to score is not to try to score, is you form the intention, then you open up to the moment, to the day, and see what happens. And so that came about, and it was interesting. It was 2000, and I was my first year working with the Lakers, and it was before a game. And like the way a lot of this stuff happens, I don't know what made me say that, but I said to Kobe, the best way to score is not to try to score. And he got what I was saying. In other words, like, you're trying too hard. That's what most of us
Mm-hmm.
do. We try too hard. We're trying to make things happen instead of allowing things to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a certain quality of trust and faith in yourself, faith in what you're doing, and confidence in yourself. You have to be open, and you have to, like you talked about, you shoot with the expectation of making a shot. So you expect that. And of course, I'm going back to my Christian roots, but in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus was talking, and he talked about the acronym ASK, ASK. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and ye shall find, and knock and it shall be open unto you. So it's realizing that from a quantum physics point of view, there's these waves of possibility, and with the right intention and attention, and under the right conditions, you're going to have the collapse of the wave function. So that possibility is there. So if we act as if the possibility is available to us, then we call this expectation, outcome expectation, or self-fulfilling prophecy. You expect things to work out, but it may not be today. It may not be this moment. But my job is to continue to intend and bring that quality of enthusiasm and ready, just staying on task and not quitting, not stopping. But I can bring a joy to it. I can bring like a childlike quality of just a sense of wonder, a sense of excitement, curiosity. Those qualities of mine really help us to have the patience to allow things happen. So we form the intention, but then coming from that silence, that stillness, there's a part of us that we got to get out of the way so we can be ourselves. We get in the way. We're trying too hard, or
Right.
we're saying it should be this way instead of saying, no, the way is, you just got to accept whatever's there and go with it. It's like improvisation.
Right.
It's like when you're doing improv, somebody offers you something, and I read this um, example. Is like, okay, there's an elephant in the bathroom, And how do you deal with that? Well, I hope he doesn't use all the toilet paper, something like that, right? But it's that sort of thing. Even though it's ridiculous and it's like, oh my goodness, but if you can just go with it, flow with it, then you get into the rhythm. You get in alignment with how things are. And when you're in alignment, you find yourself as if you're in a current being carried
Mm,
downstream, because you've just stopped resisting the flow of life, and you're in the flow of life.
yeah. That that improv rule, like you have to say yes. And if you're listening and
Well, you
you've
don't
never
have to, but
tried.
if you want to keep it, you want to keep moving, you have to.
Exactly.
But if you
Exactly.
want
And
to
that's
stop and begin again, then that's different. But then the other person that says, well, you didn't take that one. When you say something, I'm not taking what you say.
right.
Now it's a tit for tat, instead of being a more of, I want to say, I won't even say coordination, more of a partnership, more of a unification.
Yeah, it's like a co-creation, just like we
Yes.
are all in co-creation with the universe right now, or God, or source, whatever all of us choose to call it. It's this recognizing that we can fight against it and keep saying no when it's trying to give us opportunities, when it's giving us moments to learn things, or we can say, okay, yes, this is here right now. This is,
Hmm.
I think that the number one reframe that I work with my clients on, if they don't come into working with me having it, is like shifting out of this is happening to me to this is happening for me. Because once you make that
Yes.
shift,
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
then you open up yourself to learning and curiosity and that wonderment and that childlike sense of like what do I get to learn from this versus
Hmm.
that victim side of this keeps happening to me.
Yeah. Especially when we think about it in terms of, we're waiting for something to jump out of the bushes or something, rather than the looking at it as an adventure,
Mm-hmm.
as something that's going to be amazing. And this is until we culturize children, they have a vivid imagination, and they're open to everything. They're seeing everybody, and they're embracing everything as of equal value. And we get away from that, and as a result, we spend most of our time. If it's something we like, we move towards it. If it's something we don't like, we have aversion or move away from it, avoid it. And if it's neither pleasant or unpleasant, and we're not in we're not in equanimity, we space out,
Mm.
because there's no interest there, and the mind is dull. So of course it has nothing to do but waste time, or just kind of get lost, because there's nothing. That's why goal setting, or having a clarity of mind, or having an intention, is really important. And sometimes the intention is just to see what comes up, just to open up to all the possibilities. And so that was the thing that Kobe learned, was because when you think about what he was going into it with the linear mind, saying, okay, I want to score 32 points a game, so there's 4 quarters, so each quarter I have to score 8 points, and so you're actually limiting what you could possibly get,
Right.
versus not having an agenda and scoring 16 in the first quarter. That's what
Right.
happened. He scored 16 points in the first quarter without trying to score. So which one do you want? You want to trying to score or not trying to score? But you have the intention. So people say you're not trying to score. That doesn't mean that you're not doing what you need to do to score. You're not trying to do the opposite of scoring or not to score. But what it means is you're just open to the possibility of the present moment.
Mm.
And that by not having an agenda, you're open to all the other opportunities. And so you find that there's an abundance there. And it's contrary to what we think, but it's really about, and I talk about this in my new book. When I was a freshman in college, the book, a song that the Parliaments, the Funkadelics made, and the title of the song was "Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow." So it's just like, you have to realize that we imprison ourselves. That's the
Mm.
bad news. The good news is, because we're our own prisoner, jailer, we can let ourselves out. But the challenge is, and I remember watching this movie, Emile Zola, and it was about the Dreyfus affair, and this guy was wrongly, uh, accused, and he was in Devil's Island. And when they opened the cell for him to get out, he couldn't go out. He'd go out and come back in. He could.
Mm.
He just didn't want. He couldn't go out, and that's how we are with ourselves, because the dizziness of freedom, or just this idea of what Kierkegaard called, because we don't talk about one side of the coin is potential, like this quarter. Heads is potential. Tails is anxiety, uncertainty. They come together, and so
Hmm.
we have to be able to say yes to it, and do what we need to do anyway. So we don't really talk about that part of, and it's what Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard. Uh, I don't know what his title was, but he's a very good psychologist. He called it the alarming possibility of being able.
Mm.
That's what he called it. And so you got to say yes, because, and I learned this studying neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, is that when you set a goal, there's the benefits, but there's also a downside to achieving a goal. So you got to, once again, we're talking about awareness as inclusion, as embracing everything, not just looking at what's good or bad or neither, but just looking at being inclusive, having that wide view of just the idea is to take in everything so you can see the connections. Does that make sense?
1000%. Yeah, there's so much more to that theme of possibility that we get to choose from when we are not limiting ourselves to just the 8 points a quarter. And I really love what you said about we are our own prisoners. We're in a jail of our own making in our minds so
Mm-hmm.
often. And you speak to it really beautifully in the book. How when I think it was when Phil approached you to come work with him in the Bulls, that you were working in jails, and to
Mm-hmm.
really, like, y'all, please get this book. This shameless plug for George's book right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
please get and read this book, because the way he applies so many of these concepts in so many different settings, it's truly remarkable. And it was giving me a lot of Viktor Frankl vibes, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about man's search for meaning, and someone who, under the most horrific conditions, which being in jail, not a great condition, however, can still find a peace of mind and recognize that our choice is always ours to take. And anytime we think that it's not, it really is part of our own conditioning and or society's conditioning that's been placed upon us. However, we're the ones that have to get ourselves free from that. No one's going to
Yes.
come unlock the
Yes.
door to
Yes.
think like you actually do have enough power within to change your mind about this subject, or to open yourself up to saying yes and to looking at this from a new point of view. Like that is all on us to figure out how to do and
Yeah.
how to open ourselves up to.
Yeah. Because we're always deciding, and even when we don't decide, we're making a decision.
Exactly.
So he talks about, one of the things that he talked about is this idea of, in between the space between stimulus and response, we have the freedom and power to choose. So he talks about meaning, and he talks about three ways of finding meaning. So it's not inherent meaning in the universe. We give everything all the meaning it has. That's one of the Course of Miracles teachings, is you start to see, I give everything all the meaning it has. So something happens, and then we interpret what it means. And depending on whether we're in fear or love, that's going to determine how we see things. So if you don't like what you're getting, just change how you're looking at it.
Mm.
So it's this idea of taking unavoidable suffering and choosing your response to it, where you say yes to life, where you embrace your dignity, your love, your compassion. And sometimes you do it because you know it's for the greatest good. Just for me, being able to say, I'm going to go and meet my maker under my own on my own terms. And now I had an experience of this when I was in recovery early on. And it's interesting. I have a huge family, but I have a great relationship with my relatives, especially my uncles and aunts. But there's one uncle, he lived out of town, and his wife had died the year before, so I hadn't seen him in years. And he moved back to Boston to get his chemo, because he had chemo. He had cancer in his face. And I remember he used to say, "Hey man, how come you're not coming by?" Because him and his sons, they'd be over there, they'd be smoking weed or whatever because that's how he dealt with the nausea. But he was alcoholic before that, so he would drink a lot, or not me calling him alcoholic, but he used to imbibe. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
And so when I told him, I said, "Well, Uncle, I don't go to. I'm not available because I go to these meetings. I have a problem with alcohol and drugs and whatnot." And so I'm I'm abstaining, and I'm going to these meetings, and they're helping me. And so when it was time for him to die, he decided not to take any pain meds because he wanted to meet his maker with
Mm.
pure consciousness, without having anything between him and his experience of observing it. And I never talked to him. I never talked to him in a sense like you should do this. Drinking is bad. I never did that. I just was just being, sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and just being me. And he got that. And I
Mm.
can't tell you how many other people stopped drinking because they said, "Oh, George stopped, and look what he did. I'm gonna stop." And they didn't have a problem per se, but they saw the quality and the change. And so that's the other thing is, we become the message. And so it's about embodying what we believe. We can do that for a day, as you would
Mm.
say. So we can
Hmm.
do it for 24 hours. So that's why my experience is you have no idea that when you find your voice, when you embrace things, like when you find meaning from your attitude you have towards unavoidable suffering, or you find meaning in creating a work of art or doing a deed, just being helpful. You talked about something in the beginning about the greatest commandment, the second part, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I would say that's the problem, because we don't love ourselves. How are we going to love our neighbors? Or,
Exactly.
and we've been told that it's selfish to love yourself first. You're supposed to love the other person. But if you use that belief system when you fly and you have a little one, and you have somebody who needs your care and attention, if you put the mask on them first, you won't be there to take care of them. You got to put the mask on you first. That's the metaphor. So you got to love yourself first. You got to be selfish to be selfless.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. And this is what I talk about: no struggle, no swag. So if you're struggling, those are swag opportunities. That's what it is. You get the swag because you earn it. You got the swag because you walked through. You dealt with it, said yes to it, and learned from it. That's where the swag comes from. The swag, you got to earn it. You don't get that just by showing up. You get that by being able to overcome adversity, to embrace your difficulties, because that's where your life is. That's where your ability to express your latent abilities will express itself in the heat of battle, in the heat of that
Mm.
tension of the unpleasantness or the discomfort.
Yeah. You cannot fake swag. And like you can tell when it's fake swag.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like, that energy is very distinct. It's like, because it's like trying too hard. It's that trying too hard
yeah,
energy.
or not trying hard enough, because it
Or
came it came about. There's a story about I was working with this a women's volleyball team, and it's my friend's team, and I was just in California, and they kept saying, "Wow, we want a softer, easier way." And so for me, I was talking, but then once again, things come out that I just the spirit's flowing through me to love the spirit, and I said, "You know something? No struggle, no swag. I got swag. I earned it," and they loved it so much. So instead of them saying we don't work, they were full of energy. They loved it. They put it up in their locker room. No struggle, no swag, because it hit
yes,
them. They got it. There was
yes.
something that said, "Yes, yes, this is an opportunity. This is not something to be avoided. This is something to embrace."
Mm,
And they got it. But I embodied that, and I talked
mm.
about. I said, "Yeah, I got swag, but I earned that. But I wasn't trying to get swag. I was just a byproduct of showing up for your life and taking responsibility. That's all it is."
Yeah. Amen. There's there are so many things again in your books that I'm like, yes, yes. The underlying. I actually I met Kenji on the summit
Okay.
boat in May, and we were talking about you, and he's like, "Have you read the new book yet?" And it was like a week after it had come out, and this
Yeah.
man had his copy completely dog-eared, like the
Yes. Yes.
cover torn, like he took it
Yeah.
everywhere. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, like I'm on it. Like as soon as I get back, I'm reading it. And so that's a bit how I feel. I'm like, all right, we've got 30 more minutes. Where do we go next? I think one of the things that I really like to teach upon and help people understand, right, is that uh, our metacognition, our ability to think about our thoughts, is one of the most important skills that we can start to really hone for ourselves. And meditation is the fastest way to see what's going on inside your head and start to recognize when the thoughts that are running game on you, like you can run game back on them. And so I teach people how to play thought defense. And I really look at uh, gratitude as a zone defense. Like if you were practicing gratitude on a regular basis, it's like you've
Yes.
got everything covered. There's not going to be a whole lot of holes. It's going to give you a really solid foundation for setting the tone in your mindset and the energy in your body towards a different vibration. And then I talk about affirmations, specifically what I call anti-thoughts. I work with people to identify a limiting or expired belief that's hidden somewhere down in their subconscious that keeps tripping them up, right? And then we do some visualization to go resolve some of the emotion around it. And then we create this very bespoke anti-thought, right? It's like a custom affirmation that I give them to use to run their man-to-man defense on. Because it's like, okay, when this thought pops up, you need to be like, I am worthy and capable. I am worthy and capable, and tell it to like kick rocks, because there is, in a sense, on our personal growth and spiritual paths, a muscle that we have to learn to flex when to tell your mind to shut up. And it's like, that's actually not the path we're going down anymore. Like, I get that that's why we were here. I get that that thought or that emotion kept me safe at a different
Yeah.
point in my life.
Yeah.
However, we have to learn how to like almost gaslight ourselves sometimes in some situations and be like, I hear you, I see you, now sit down, because we are worthy and capable and we are going this way today, not that way. And so I'm curious to know, A, how this all lands with you, and B, what sort of affirmations or specific mantras may have been really supportive for you in your journey.
Yes. So, two thoughts that I had early on in recovery that helped me a lot was, number one, God doesn't give me, or the universe doesn't give me anything that I can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part was, I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
Mm.
So those two things. But to me, it's really cultivating, like you talked about, cultivating things like love and kindness, or love. Like for me, it's interesting. It's a very simple teaching that I got from Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you heard of Edgar Cayce, but this man that would go into trance, and he had a person that would just record things and ask questions, and he could do you give him a name, he could tell you the person, where they live, what ailment they had, and how to heal it. So there's this idea that we have what they call the Akashic records, or this is
Yep.
a database for consciousness, or everything that ever was or will be is in this database, or in this, in this node. And he would access that, and that's how he was able to predict. And so he was coming up with cures, talking about his thing for health was the acronym CARE, CARE, circulation, assimilation, relaxation, elimination,
Mm.
things like that. The mind, body, the whole thing, mind, body. He was making predictions about the Essenes, where they had the Dead Sea Scrolls, where scholars thought that it was only men, and he said no, there were women and children there. And years later, they dug it up and they found skeletons of men and women. So he just there's a knowing. He's tapping into what I call this knowing that goes beyond human research. We just know stuff, and we have access to that. But anyway, one of the things he talked about was the most important thing you could do is establish a spiritual ideal. And so for
Mm.
me, my spiritual ideal is love. And so he said that you do what it's called attunement and application. So what does that mean? That means that you attune yourself to love. So you talk about affirmation, you can use love, you can use images, whatever, but the idea is to have the felt sensation of love, or openness, of warm and fuzzy, whatever it is. And then that becomes you channel that, you let it flow through your body. And as you're doing this meditation and meditating on love and just feeling love, seeing it, feeling it, engaging the senses. And if somebody comes up that you're not really feeling that. You might be hating on whatever. You just notice that, and then you send them blessings, or you just tolerate them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
things that come up. But what you do is to put you in attunement with love, to put you on the love vibration, and then that's the attunement part. And then the application part is to be loving. So now I have a standard from which I operate, and not only as a energy I want to express through my being, but it's also a standard. Was I loving? Was I not loving enough? And so
Mm-hmm.
you can see that, because we do need to have standards, or have things, images of how we want to be, and how we evaluate, was that helpful, was that not helpful, that was loving, or that wasn't so loving, or whatever. So you can just see that simple teaching, but it raises your vibration, your consciousness, to a level where it allows you to see things and to feel more connected to yourself, especially parts of ourselves, as you talked about. We have these sub personalities that are inside, that when we get into our role as, like as a daughter or a sister, or maybe playing a certain sport or doing a certain task, and that those sub personalities, when you're in that energy of the one, the other ones don't exist. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we want to do is be able to be constantly who we are, no matter what role we're in. And so we want to have that consciousness. And so the idea is how do you stay in love? Because love helps you open your mind and heart, and it's just a great energy. All you need is love, and when you love something, you make it grow. And it's what Eric Fromm talked about. So love is really important. So that's what I use. You can even be your higher power. You can see God as love or whatever, but just vibrating to the love. I talk about it in the book about the wolves. I'm feeding the love wolf, so that the love wolf is going to show up even when I'm not even paying attention. The love wolf's going to be there because I program myself, and
Right.
that's my spiritual ideal. That's my spiritual foundation, and that is the standard in which I operate. What I, when I when I through my words, thoughts, and deeds, that's going to be standard. Was that loving? Was that not loving? Was that helpful? Was it not helpful? And that's what it is. Not to be judging, but to just have a standard from which we want to live by. So going back to loving our neighbors as ourselves, we got to start seeing people. I see people as a masterpiece. So with that energy, I could be loving, and sometimes it's just saying good morning, or people that don't talk to us is just smiling, or just not hating on them, or saying they should be able to say hi. Just embrace them as they are. Just let them be.
Mm.
Just send them love vibration. That's the love and kindness thing. So there's a lot we could do, but to love our neighbors as ourselves, we got to get into this idea that everything begins with me. It's an inside job. It's when I can be loving, when I can let love flow through me, and then be loving to others. If I want love, I have to be love.
Absolutely. Love is, oh, it really is all we need.
Yeah.
And going back to that idea of our, the world by design is doing a lot to keep us from that true vibrational access of love. I actually got an Instagram ad the other day for a little love tuner. Have you seen those?
No, I haven't seen them.
It's like a little breathing device. Like I'm once they get the color that I like back in stock, I'm gonna check it out. But it's like a necklace that you can wear around your neck, obviously, and then it's a little breathing device that when you blow into it, it vibrates and gives the tone of 528 hertz, which is the
Mm.
vibration of love.
Well,
And
that's
so
that's
just
the
like
tones. Yeah, the tones. Yes, friend. That's what he does. He uses tones. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, the importance of sound as we move forward in humanity as medicine like cannot be understated. I think that it is just one of the fastest ways, especially as we look at so much happens in the mind, right? There's so much that needs to be done to tame the mind, to work with the mind, to not let it run its game on you. And there's so much that we're learning, specifically, I would say, in the last like 10, 15 years around trauma in our bodies and somatic practices that help us clear out the stuck energy and
Hmm.
emotion that you
Yeah,
simply can't think your way around it. You
right.
can't, there's no way that you're going to be able to just think enough positive thoughts to get rid of some of the shit that our bodies hold on to, not to mention
Hmm.
the field of epigenetics and what we're now realizing is being passed down. And so I'm curious, what does that look like for you nowadays as you start to think about so much of how mind, body, spirit triune has always been a part of so many different types of teachings? What does that look like in your practice?
Well, I'm kinesthetic, so I feel things in movement, physical activity. I talk about the whole person. So I have four dimensions, at least four: the body, the mind, the heart, and the soul or spirit. So those have to be exercised.
Mm,
When I first got in recovery, we talked about body, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. I added the emotional because that's the heart, and that's, although you can see the heart being in everything else, especially with the mental and the spiritual. But it's exercising these things and realizing that we're energy. E equals MC squared.
mhm,
And so the kind of energy, and energy doesn't die, it just transforms. And so energy has a lot to do with it. I know from my recovery that one of the things that was adamant as a practice was to improve conscious contact with a higher power.
mm,
And if you think about it that way, and David Hawkins talks about attractive fields, and he uses kinesiology to schedule, if your body goes strong when it's for life versus the opposite. Yes, you got it. So when I
love
think
doctor.
about that, I think about it, you have to be aware that you have a body, you have a mind, you have a heart, you have a spirit. Or in the traditions of four foundations of mindfulness, we talk about mindfulness of the body. It's a grounding thing. Mindfulness of feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and seeing that the nervous system uh, is processes things. If it's pleasant, it approaches. If it's unpleasant, it avoids, and if it's neither, it spaces out. So we start to see, you see that we feel about certain things. If it's pleasant, we can see we want more of it. If it's unpleasant, we don't want it. And then we think about this idea of the consciousness of it, identification, cognition. What is it? And then what we call then the thinking about it, or we even call it a word that it proliferates, papancha. You get one thought, then it goes another, or whatever. And at some point, you talked about it a little bit. It's part of right effort. It's like when you have an unwholesome thought, like fear or doubt, insecurity. There's ways you can look at it. One way you can deal with it is just, but the first step is the awareness of it, without being identified with it. So there's anger in me, and Thich Nhat Hanh talks about breathing in. I feel the anger, breathing out, I let it go. So there's anger there, and then what's the opposite of anger? You can focus on that, like you talk about the thought, changing, being actively changing a hateful thought to a loving thought, or fear to having confidence, or having being grounded, having a refuge. So it's the
Mhm,
opposite of it. But a lot of times the practice has to do with this idea of noticing it, and then noticing it, and noticing that when fears in mind, we know what it's going to do. So we notice it, and then we direct our attention to something else. Let
mhm,
it go. And we do the opposite. We can do a bunch of things, but as we progress, and as we get more mindfulness and consciousness and ability to observe things uncritically, or being the eye of a hurricane, and just equanimity, then we start to see, okay, so now is the time that when anger is in me, I don't I don't leave it. I actually make that the object of awareness, especially if
mhm,
it's overwhelming us. Just noticing how it feels in my body, just noticing how it affects my ability to think. Noticing, you can see how we get into this narrow energy, and the energy is kind of tight and whatnot. And you can get comfortable with that if you can get to a place where you can observe things and realize the anger and the consciousness of the anger are two separate things. So the awareness of it, it's like mirror mind. It's reflecting it. You just notice, oh, it's just a reflection in the mirror. That's not who you are. That's what you're experiencing. But can you
right.
see it? But you need to get intimate with these emotions, whether it's anger or love, so that you know when it's present and how it's affecting your ability. We call it a hindrance because it affects our ability to see clearly or to be in a moment. And so
Mhm,
you start that, but that's when you embrace and you start realizing that all experiences are of equal value. That's equanimity. It's like you're just embracing it. You're not moving towards it, away from it. You're just holding your center and you're just noticing and saying, oh, that's interesting. When I look at it this way, then it pisses me off and I get resentments. And okay, but can you step back and just notice that and how it's affecting you, how you're attached to things? So that's when the practice evolves, where you start realizing it really comes down to just being in the moment, seeing things as they are, and not trying to push them away, pull them towards us, or to even interpret what they mean. Because if we be still and know and just watch it, it'll be clear how it arises, how it passes away, and what are the conditions in which it arises. And when you
Mm.
understand that, then you can change the conditions. And so if you're in so I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was doing this. I was working at this corporation, and they had a health fair, and I had my body fat measured. And in those days, I was a lot less. I used to run all the time before I couldn't run, so I used to do a lot of running. And it says something like I had something like, I don't know what the exact number is, but say 11.2 body fat or something like that. So my negative committee was saying, dude, man, if you have more than 3 or 2%, you know, 3 or 4%, whatever it was, then you're a fat slob, and you're not okay. There's something wrong with you. And so I could see once the 11.2 popped up, and I could see the negative committee going, and I just said, time out. I'm not trying to hear that. And I just set it aside, and I was
You're
able to
benched.
move on.
Get over there.
Yeah. And then I remember earlier on, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh yeah, and it said, even though it said because I had more muscle that I could, because it said I was overweight, I should only I'd be dead, but I would think I weighed like 179 or something like that, and it said I should be 160, whatever it was. It was like 12 pounds less, but it said because of my muscle or my muscle mass, which means less fat, that I could carry that weight. But I couldn't see that because I had the negative committee telling me you're not enough, or you're not where you're supposed to be. You're not perfect. And I just was able to silence it, but just by just giving it space, just noticing it, and then directing my attention to something else. And then when my friend told me, I laughed. He said, "Oh, 11 point, the average is like 13.2, whatever the average was. I may not be accurate, but it was below average." And then I started laughing. I said, "Man, I avoided a lot of angst by just noticing where that was going, and say, I'm not going there. Because
Right.
I know where this is leading. And that's the wisdom that you can develop, is noticing. I had this conversation, we used to call it the voice. You got to answer the voice and say, I'm not trying to hear that, but I hear you, but I'm not giving you any energy. So guess what? I'm going to delegate you to the back. Just like when you're in a restaurant, you have the background music. You're in the background,
Yep.
just put you there, and then you're gonna play yourself out, or because I'm not focused on you, you don't exist. You're just there,
Yep.
but I'm not giving you any energy. So that's what we can do. Like I said, we have this greatness. We have this ability to step back and, like you said, to see things. We can see our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, how we're feeling, how the body's feeling. We have this ability to observe it with mirror mind, where we just notice it and we don't have to do anything, but by the seeing of it, by allowing the space for it, it'll come and go, just like clouds. It'll rise and pass away. It may have its own time, but we're not identified with it. We're just aware. We're just witnessing it. So we're like a silent witness that can watch it and
Mm.
just have this the consciousness of it. That's what it is, and that's natural. But it's so easy and so natural. We don't practice it because we think it can't be that simple. It can't be. You can just, like Yogi said, you can see a lot just by observing this. But you got to look. It's an inside job. You got to look and think about how you're feeling, whatever. Like even now, if you think about it, just by thinking about your body and the inside out, and you're sitting and what the body feels like in a seated posture, that's a felt sense.
Hmm.
And at the same time, you're breathing in and breathing out, and that's available 24/7. We can just, but it's not out here. It's like the felt sense of sitting or standing, walking, whatever the body is in. We can anchor ourselves in the moment, in the day, by just noticing where our feet are, where our
Mm.
body is, and we can just be aware of sitting and breathing and knowing it. And that way we can observe thoughts, feeling, behaviors, or even just feeling like, uh, I'm not. motivated to do anything. I'm in this kind of neutral zone, or just like I'm just kind of spazzing out. Mercury's in retrograde or whatever. you know, you can just notice that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just be with it instead
Yeah,
of,
but that's
yeah.
too simple. That
Well,
is
and
way
that's,
too simple.
I mean, it's so fascinating how all the answers are literally within us.
Hmm.
And yet we have, again, the conditions of this world convincing us otherwise, and that got us distracted and plugged into everything and everywhere else and looking for our answers in Google or our best friends or on social media. And it's like, nah, you just got to get quiet. You've got to make some time and space to start learning how to listen to what's happening within
Hmm.
your own vessel, and
Hmm.
how to discern, not judge, but discern the different voices and thoughts and
Hmm.
narratives that are happening, and understand which ones are really still serving you very well and which ones are time to relegate to the back and tell them
Hmm.
to thank you very much, please sit down, and start to co-create our external experiences internally. And it's a beautiful thing. And you just, y'all, again, get the book, because he
Yes.
walks you through on what that really looks like, on how to stay in that conscious connection, and how to really unlock and identify that greatness so you can step into the flow. And one of my purposes in life is to help people find and get to their one day, right? Like, what is
Hmm.
your one day dream? Because I believe that if everybody started showing up in their one day energy and start going after that thing that they really wanted to do one day, and started, ignoring the constraints or the excuses or the whatever, like, we'd live in a very, very different world. And I think about your book in that same way. It's like, man, what would a world with, like, not even 100% of people unlocked? Because I don't, like, is that possible? I'm not sure. I'm curious
Yes,
to know
I
how.
think the possibility exists. The probability might be a little
Mm,
lower, but it all depends on the people we're talking about in the world. And but I think the more we talk about it, the more we embody it. I think that is what they call morphogenic fields.
mm,
It's like the hundred monkey. You have somebody do something, and then the potential for somebody else doing it is increased tremendously. Like the 4 minute mile. Once you
right,
go
right.
4 minute mile, I think was it Sir Alan Bannister, I think is his name, or
Yep.
something like that. Uh, then everybody started doing it, but he created the possibility. So once the possibility is in your mind, then anything is possible. I know in my own experience of when I was working with Boston College women's basketball, and we were playing in the Big East tournament before they went to the ACC. And the thinking was that any team that didn't get a bye had very little chance of winning the whole tournament, because you had to play 4 days in a row.
Mm,
So, from my understanding, so no one had done that, but we were the first team that I know of, a female team, a women's team in the Big East, that won a championship playing 4 days in a row. And
and so,
it's even more fascinating to that because our starting center tore her ACL before we started the tournament and practiced before, and we still, and I believe we went to the Sweet 16 that year. We had a
wow.
rookie center, and we just, we beat UConn at Gamble at their home sport to win the
Wow.
Big East tournament. So, and you see it. So you see it all the time. I was with, when I worked with the Bulls, and we won 72 games in 1 year before, when we won a championship. And on top of that, but you can see these little things. You can see um, that, when you think about Phil Jackson's teams, he's got 11, as a coach, he's got 11 championships. But had the Celtics not turned the game around, I think it was in game 5 or 6. I think it was 2-2, and they were in LA and they were down. He came back and won that game. So he was like very close to having 4 3-peats.
Hmm.
He tends to win games and, championships and multiples. But it comes down to that. It comes down to the moment anything's possible. But I mean, we can access it. We can find that flow. We can discover success. but it's an inside job. And sometimes we talk about the individual, but it's also a collective. You can be in collective flow. You can be in team flow.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's important if well, I'm curious. I would say you probably can't be fully in team or collective flow unless you're in your individual flow first and foremost.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
And so it's like if we are really trying to change some shit out here in the world, right? Like how do we get everybody unlocked in their one day energy, or at least enough of a percentage of humanity to start tipping things in a different direction?
Yes. Well, we got to have, I think I was listening to an audible the other day, and the gentleman talked about, and I don't know how true this is, but he says we have 9 negative thoughts out of every 10 thoughts we have.
Yeah.
And so that's, and I believe it was at, I forget the woman's name, the psychologist, just talked about the happiness thing. So we got to at least get 3 positive thoughts to every 1 negative thought. If we can get it to that 3-1 ratio, that's helpful to get that. But to the degree that you got to see them and then consciously, as you talked about, being willing to change them. But if you're in a love vibration, or you're feeding a love wolf, or you're focusing on what you want, or if you're focusing on how you can serve, or you're focusing on not trying to score just to help your team win, there's all of these as a byproduct. There's these things that happen that keep us in a certain way of being. And yeah, but it's a vibration. We're energetic. So what energy are you bringing? Are you bringing energy that's cohesive and harmonious, or are you bringing an energy that's divisive and disruptive and chaotic?
Right. Yeah, I love all of the references and resources that you have in all of your books. I'm very excited. I've never read The Inner Game. And so I'm really looking forward to checking that one out. I'm curious to know what books you're currently reading that you would recommend.
Oh, there's always a lot of books. I'm always like I was listening to a podcast. Well, what I've been focusing on this summer, because I've been focusing on flow a lot. This guy Stephen Kotler wrote a book. One of his books that I've been meditating on for the last couple of months is The Art of the Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good one. The Talent Code is another one I was looking at. I have to look at my and then there's some books like The Sound of Silence by Arjan Sumedo. So um,
Ooh.
I read all kinds of books, and then let me look at my library because sometimes I can't keep up with them. And then I read a lot of books multiple times, like the books I mentioned. I probably read those probably 4 times this summer, if not
It's so
more.
nice to go back and read books and see
Yeah,
what you
yeah. Well,
didn't
that's
pick
what
up the
I
first
gave
time.
myself permission to keep
Yeah.
reading it, and then the circular learning. You learn so much by looking at it. So the art of learning is one of the ones that I just from some podcast. Let me see if I can get to um, what it looks like. Let me see here. Yeah, it's called uh, The Art of Learning: An Inner Journey to Optimal Performance. But Sound
Ooh.
of Silence. I went back to an old book by Alan Watts, the book, and Philod's Performance. There's a lot, and another book I got called Range. I haven't really
Oh,
gotten
I've heard that one's really good.
there.
That's been on
It's
my
about
list.
yes, yes. Of course, I talked about Viktor Frankl. He has a book that says yes to life in spite of everything. Um, Louise Hay, The Power is Within You.
I love
Yeah,
Luis.
yeah. I mean, I didn't even know she had passed away, but she's been, and of course, there's a book called Trust and Inspired by Stephen M. Covey, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the son, who I consider a friend. And there's a bunch of other books out there. My friend Jay Abrams has a book coming out, and I forget the name of it, but he's got a new book coming out.
Well, anything by Jay Abrams is going to be fire.
Yeah, yeah. He's got he's got a new book coming out. Uh,
Have
and
you
then
ever
my friend
read?
Roland Lazenby, it comes out I think next month. He wrote a book about Magic Johnson. He's written a book about
Oh,
Kobe,
really?
MJ, Jerry West, several books about the Bulls. But his new book on Magic Johnson, because I've been in it with him, because he calls me, we talk about it, and it's always a huge thing. He gets into to the history of the family and all that stuff. So he's written a bunch of books, but that's a book coming out, the Michael Jordan book, the Kobe book, the MJ book, the Jerry West book.
All
He
right,
just loves the
I've got
books.
a very unrelated question.
Yes.
So I moved from Wichita, Kansas to Oak Park, Illinois on the west side of Chicago in the year 1998. And I
Okay.
am curious,
I was there.
which Jerry do I need to go? Does my 15-year-old self need to go back and have a forgiveness visualization for breaking up the boys just as I arrived in town? Because there's a lot of conflicting reports out there. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if you're willing to weigh in on which
Yes.
Jerry was more the driving force behind that decision.
I think that it had more to do with avarice or greed, or
Mm,
taking yourself too seriously and thinking that it's about you and not about it. Because there was a very public display of that when Jerry Krause said that organizations win championships
mm,
and not teams, individuals.
mm-hmm.
And one could say it's a spurious argument about that, but it takes the whole village to win a team. But this is what destroys teams. The Dallas Cowboys, they were
Mm,
roommates in college and they couldn't get that stuff straight. You talk about the Beatles, and that's a different thing. They wanted to go artistically. There's a lot of organizations that think they could do it without the person, and they get rid of him. But they could have won two more championships easily, and that's
easily.
frustration. But when you get to a point where you think it's about you, so I would say there's a lot of blame to go around in terms of the jury, because if you're the owner, you get the final call,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think they don't want to go there because hindsight's 2020. But the reality is, I think they thought that as long as they have Michael, they could rebuild. But they don't understand how. Most people that get to the championship and have a team that can win multiple championships don't, when they get the hubris comes in, and when they don't forget themselves and just let things happen and try to make things happen, it creates a lot of stuff. But they could have very easily, and I think people would have been willing to come back, take less money to win again. But then sometimes things change, so it's hard to say, because sometimes you could say it's this thing or that thing. But all I know is all conditioned things have a nature to arise and
Right.
fade. So we could say all of that, but the reality is there's all of these other variables that are in vogue that allow people to say yes or to say no, or for things to change. So I don't play the blame game. I think, of course, that's why Phil called it the last dance. It was time to go.
Mm-hmm. So I'll sit down with both Jerrys in my visualization, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, if I were you, I would pray for them. One's still alive, the other one's gone, and but yeah, I would pray for them, and but yeah, I could see that, because I mean that had a huge impact on me, because I was there, and we could have won two more championships.
Mm,
And when you think about it, so Phil leaves there, takes a year off, then he goes to LA and
mm-hmm.
wins three. So from 1996 to 2002, in that 7 year period, the 1 year in between the two franchises, Phil didn't work. But in that 6 years, we won. In that 7 years, his teams won seven out of six championships in 7 years.
That's got to be the best
Yeah, and that was
record
all
of all
good. And
time.
and the funny about it, you talk about keeping in the day. I didn't realize that till years later when I was sitting down and writing my experience, and I said, "Wait a minute! I was actually involved in six NBA championships in the 7 year period. Wow, two
All
different
because
teams."
all because you showed up and said yes.
No,
and
oh,
just let
because
it flow.
well, I think the universe colluded with us. I think this is
I,
what happened. But Phil, obviously, Phil was a big part of it. I mean, it was his. He was a leader. He's the one that created the environment. But once again, even with that, you get the owners and get people in, and they disrupt it, and that's what happens. And if if you think about Popovich being there as long as he has,
mm-hmm,
Steve Kerr doing what he had to do, you got to look at the ownership. You got to look at the leadership. You got to look at the environment and people being willing to let people do what they do without having to go in and impose their will on it. Just saying.
mm, mm.
When you got
Great.
something like that and you got people in place, you just got to forget yourself to find yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion. But I haven't been in it and be it's like and then in LA then winning two more, almost winning three, but there's a couple of championships like the 2004 against the Pistons. I mean if Kyle Malone and Horace Grant don't get hurt, we probably win that series.
Mm-hmm. And everything worked out exactly like it was supposed to.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what
Yep.
I'm saying.
Well, George, if people want to stay in touch with you, what's the best place to
Yes,
do
thank
that?
you. So George at georgemumford.com is the website. I have a YouTube channel that I post to every week. And if they want to get in touch with me, if you go to the website, they can get all that. They can get all the information, or they can email connect@georgemumford.com and they can
Beautiful.
get stuff like that. But yeah, and the books, the books you can get
Get
on
the books.
Amazon or
Get the
Barnes and Noble
books.
or whatever, or you might be able to get them from the website. I don't keep up with my own website,
Ah,
so
that's
but
the dream,
but
sir.
yeah, but the main thing is, I've been around. I'm an OG, not an old gangster. I've been around. So if you Google, you'll find all kind of stuff. But we have programs. We gotta. Actually, this Sunday, I'll just mention it. We're having a town hall for parents and teachers and administrators because we have a youth course that we offer. We're
Mm,
working on. So we have that, and then we have the Mindful Athlete Online course. It's offered. I think we in October we have the fall 6 week study group beginning, and it's a lifetime access. Once you join it, you can always. So this will be our seventh or eighth, and we always have a theme. This theme is Eye of the Hurricane coming up.
yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Equanimity is one of my all-time
Yes.
favorite words. It was one of my intentions, and it was my intention for the year 2021 was magnetic equanimity. Like, how can I be
Yes. I like that.
okay, so my
Good.
last question for you is every guest I could bring onto the show, I love to hear. I have a gratitude practice every night that I do, and so I want to hear one oddly specific thing that you are most grateful for in the last 24 hours.
I am grateful for the ability to be myself.
Hmm.
I'm grateful for the willingness and the ability to be still and know and to just allow myself, like I talked about, to just be with myself and
Mm-hmm.
listen to that wisdom within. I get to that eye of the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I mean, that's when I think about it. That's what it is. It's like to have an experience of being fully alive and fully expressed.
So beautiful. And you doing that gives others permission and shines light for them
Yes,
to be able to do the same. So
yes.
thank
So
you.
yeah, just grateful for the masterpiece within.
Yes.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, George. I'm
Yes.
so grateful for your time and
Yeah.
energy and wisdom.
Yeah. So
And
thank you for having me on here.
my
Yeah.
pleasure. We'll look forward to doing it again when there's another book or something else you
Well,
want
you
to
don't
come
have to
on and
wait
talk
for a book.
about.
You just when you feel like you want to have a conversation with George, just reach out. That's all.
All right. All right. Don't tempt me. I'll do it again.
Hey, I wouldn't offer it if I didn't invite
Well,
it.
thank you so
Yeah.
much, George. Look forward to having you back.
Yeah. Appreciate it.